We had a fun little preamble conversation, but otherwise, how are things going with you, Jeff?
Oh, things are great, man. I can't complain. I mean, been doing a lot of channel work, been doing some comic work behind the scenes. Things are looking good. So I'm a pretty happy guy right now.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you're doing the good comic work because we're going to be talking one of our favorite comic characters and one of the coolest aspects about him, and that is of course Spider-Man and his basically the toy every kid wished they had when they saw Spider-Man, which is a web shooter.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how could you not love it? And all the weird, not just weird, but also they're weird and cool applications that the web shooters have.
I'm with you 100% about those cool applications.
It just well, one of the things that I love about it is not only that it's a great gimmick, but it's a tool used to show just how book and tech smart Peter Parker actually is.
Oh, dude, he's a brilliant genius. I love it. Like, I actually had pulled up the Ditko stuff and, watching him with his laboratory kit, doing all this stuff, building all these things. It really amplifies what I think is Spider Man's greatest attribute, which is his brain.
Oh, absolutely, and I think it also leads into the fun aspects of the character, which is that as smart as he is, he does have this social awkwardness and kind of like this arm's reach distance of how relationships work to a various degrees. And I love how that dichotomy with him, but also how it leans into the fact that when he does kind of pick up on those other aspects, he starts reincorporating it into the tech stuff. So, for instance, like you have the classic story where Spider-Man's fighting Electro for the first time, right? And the webs don't really work on him, so he has to come up with basically using science to add something to his web fluid to neutralize Electro's electric powers, and essentially it's like a silicate or something of that nature. And it's cool problem solving. I like the fact that the web shooters are the facility to achieve those types of things.
Same. I mean, beyond the fantastic dream of just swinging through the skies. I mean, like you said, the applications are crazy, especially with like what is it, the Molten Man, or when he fights the Human Torch in one issue, he puts asbestos in his webbing, which is definitely dated by today's standards. But he creates asbestos webbing to deal with the flame, the Human Torch's firepower and stuff. It's always, I mean, for as much as I do love to read the action and the drama of Spider-Man, when he's in his, his lab or whatever you want to call it, his apartment, doing that kind of stuff, I find it fascinating. And it's one of the parts of Spider-Man I don't think you can ever remove from the character. You can modernize and update, but you always have to have that scientific mind and that level of creativity on the page with every version of Spider-Man you create.
And it's kind of funny that you say that because I remember these types of arguments being thrown around from fans mostly, especially at the time because I hadn't started working in the industry yet. But when Spider-Man came out with Sam Raimi's film, and the controversial thing was that, oh, it's organic web shooters and not mechanical ones. I don't know what your mindset was, but for me, I'm like, well, how's he going to do fun stuff with the webs to solve problems like and defeat his villains? Because that's one of his tools. That's one of the assets that he does. He modifies his webbing to address new situations.
Well, I was in grade school when that first movie came out, and I really wasn't into the internet as much, so I didn't even know until I saw the movie that he was going to have organic web shooters. And then I heard the Sam Raimi reasoning, which is, if he could create this kind of adhesive, he could sell it to 3M and be a millionaire. And I thought that actually kind of makes sense because Spider-Man's first motivation is always to make money, either from wrestling or entertainment or whatever it may be. So I'm like, that does kind of make sense. That being said, though, I do prefer the mechanical web shooters, but the one thing I always took away from the other mediums of Spider-Man was the web shooter was always a device, a plot device for him to run out of webbing, to fall from the sky. What's he gonna do? Like one of
Yep.
my first introductions to Spider-Man was the 1981 cartoon, just the solo Spider-Man series, not Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a Doctor Doom episode, and he's going to like swing, and he's like out of web fluid, and it shows him fall from the sky, and then it cuts to a commercial break, and I thought, oh man, we're gonna miss out on those great moments of drama. But other than that, what else? But the more I think about it, and the further I get deeper into the Spider-Man lore, and I've read all these books, I do miss that element, especially with like well, but we do get to see Peter show his scientific prowess in other ways. But I would have preferred the other web shooters. They're so much more fun. I mean, I don't even think I think they gloss over them nowadays, even with Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield. Like, yeah, Andrew Garfield was shown to develop his, and what did he do? Like import some kind of wire from the internet or something like that. But I still think there's way more to do with the webbing than just what they've done already. I think they use a lot of Stark tech instead of Peter's own brain power.
Yeah, well, I think it's the chemical is Peter's brain power, and the Stark tech is the delivery device, which I thought was a little off. Because again, basically it's just a miniaturized version of what Peter already made, at least in the Disney stuff. I like the Andrew Garfield thing. I thought that was pretty cool, but the only thing that pulled away from it is that he kind of stole that technology from like Oscorp, it seems like. Like they were already experimenting with it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of weird. But to the point, to Sans Raimi's point of like, yeah, if he could sell this technology to a company and make millions, I'd be like, well, if you really want to do it the Marvel way, he would pitch the tech to them and then be like, but it dissolves in an hour. We can't use this stuff. And then they'd just say, buy, kid. And that would be the case, because that would be the one cool aspect is why he can't monetize the web fluid, is because it has no practical use after an hour. They could be like, yeah, we got the best minds in the world looking at this thing. It's like it constantly destabilizes. There's no way we can stabilize it. And then Peter be like, shucks, no money there. You know? Because that is totally like, that's the old school, like that 60s, 70s, 80s types of Marvels. But like, yeah, he's got this technology that's be really, really great. But a true businessman would be like, well, if this is going to be a replacement for glue and it doesn't coagulate or harden or whatever, it just dissolves, then things are going to fall off. It'll be like that episode of Seinfeld with the baby label maker where the labels keep falling off all the time. Nobody wants it. They keep regifting it. So, and I think that's a perfectly suitable Spider-Man problem to have. But the one of the other aspects I like about it is the fact that, and this was introduced in the comics, is also reinforced heavily in the '90s Spider-Man cartoon, is that the web fluid is like in a pressurized capsule, and it's heat activated and it's pressure sensitive, so that it doesn't go off when he makes a fist. And like all these cool, smart little aspects that are done so subtly, and they're like breadcrumbs across all these episodes. So you understand the technology, even though it is still beyond our ability to achieve. I love those types of aspects.
Oh, so do I. I loved when I would read those diagram breakdowns in the back of annuals where it'd be like, oh, how does Spider-Man's web shooter work? And they would show the belt and the little capsules on the wrist and all that stuff. You got to double tap it to make sure he doesn't, accidentally shoot it off. And that's such a well thought out aspect of the character. Like that's the one thing I don't think enough people give credit to classic Spider-Man. All of those bases were covered so well fairly early on. I mean, hell, even something basic as the costume, it doesn't really change much ever. I mean, they kind of got everything down about Spider-Man from the get-go. Batman, Superman, other characters evolve and change. Spider-Man, it's just you don't mess with a good thing. You don't mess with perfection.
Yeah, pretty much. You have also this very fun aspect of like, okay, so is there webs under his arm or not webs under his arm? It doesn't really matter, of course, but like the basic premise is there. The other part too is like, I think in some of the later issues, correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm going mostly off of memory here, but I think it was in the early 70s, they invented kind of like the dial that you get on a garden hose spray handle, where he rotates the dial and he gets different types of nozzles for his web shooters.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact decade. That might be even earlier than the 70s. But yeah, he does have those because he can I can change it to a fine mist to do a net, or I can do it tighter to do a web line to swing from. That might even be in the 60s, like fairly early on too.
Yeah, and I'm just like, those are really clever stuff, because this is one of the things I appreciate when you're writing a character, or you're coming up with their gadgets and gimmicks is, well, what sort of applications can you come up with to solve problems? The solutions are stemming from the main character, not from like external forces, right? Because that's one of the other tropes when you see bad stories or poor comics. It's like, oh, we're going to introduce this brand new character in this one scene, and they're going to have the Deus ex machina to solve the problem that's going on with the situation. Like think of that situation where, a guy gets pulled over by the police and maybe he's got, contraband in his car and he doesn't know how to get out of it. And all of a sudden the cop is hit by a drunk driver. It's like, well, the world just saved this guy as opposed to the guy getting out of it on his own. And I love the fact that for a character like Peter Parker, I can't think of many instances when any of the writers did that for him. They're just like, nope, you're screwed, Peter. You got to figure this one out.
Yeah, I enjoy that.
Me too. And I think it always comes down to like, well, he's got his tools. So he's got like the web shooters, incorporating asbestos to stop the Human Torch, and silicon to stop Electro. And then I think he, at one point, I remember this from the cartoon, but I also think this is from the comics, where he used essentially like a Jello powder to stop Hydro Man and just mix him in there so that he solidifies and can't go into a liquid form. It's brilliant, the versatility that this kid is able to do with these cool webs.
Oh, it is. I love it. Like, I mean, there's no toy that they can ever create that'll really give you the full experience. Like, you can buy Spider-Man figures, you can buy the mask, you can buy the costume, but if you buy a web shooter, you've bought silly string. That's all you've bought. It's just silly string on a Spider-Man wristband. And it's such a fascinating, and I don't know how else to describe it. It's just a great concept. I mean, Batman has the Batarang and his gadgets like that, but Batman can do a lot of stuff with different things. Spider-Man and his webs, they just find so many different ways to alter that one thing, and it's wonderful. I mean, it's just who he is as a character, like in one little device.
Yes. It's as simple in appearance but complex in function, which is actually a great model for when you're writing a characters. You want to present them simplistically, but explore the complexities of who they are. And what a great allegory. Well done there, Jeff.
I love Spider-Man.
So what are some of your favorite, okay, like regarding whether it's oriented around web shooters or not, which is perfectly acceptable. What are some of your favorite type of Spider-Man moments that made you really like grasp onto this type of character?
Well, the first thing was the look. Being an artist myself, I'm always attracted to the images or the visual nature of that. And Spider-Man looks really cool depending on who draws him, because he can look like a bad guy or a good guy with the full face covering. I never really look at that as I can put myself behind the mask. I look at it as what could be behind that mask. It has so much going for it. So it was straight up the first thing that drew me to the character was that. And then being a fairly smart kid, I always gravitated towards the education part of that as well. I like so much of the web swinging and the crime fighting and all that's great, but I just enjoy pretty much every aspect of Spider-Man. The social nature between Peter and J. Jonah Jameson. The only parts I guess I don't really love are the Aunt May stuff, because after a while it's like just kill the old broad or find a way to, like, I don't know, send her on vacation to Florida or something. There's just so much I do like about the character. It's almost easier to say what I dislike about the character, and that really only comes around in the 90s with the Clone Saga and that kind of Spider-Man stuff. But Spider-Man's always just been visually interesting. The stories are interesting. Like, I can't tell you how many comic books I picked up and I go, wow, this looks cool. And I start to read it and I go, this is kind of dumb. But with Spidey, there's just something about every aspect. Even and the inner monologue. That's one of the things I love the most too. It's, maybe Batman will have an inner monologue and that's cool, or everybody does because it's a comic book. But Spider-Man, especially in the cartoons, that inner monologue is like the not soundtrack, excuse me, but just like a great dialogue track to the entire episode. I'd be interested to have a Spider-Man movie that does it that well. Because they never have. They may have Spider-Man speak out loud, like, move, kid, or do this or do that. But you never really hear Spider-Man have these like deep, thoughtful, almost soliloquies about his life with the mask on. It's like almost too poetic at times, but Ditko and Lee knew what they were doing with the character. So I don't know. There's just a lot I like about Spider-Man. It's almost, like I said, it's almost too difficult to say.
One of the things that's also kind of funny and pretty useful is the fact that he came up with this very versatile gimmick based on a very simple premise, which is like, who would look at a spider web and be like, hey, if I could swing from that, I could also make a shield or make a raft or make a lasso or a net or even a parachute. Or maybe I can make a club out of this stuff. And it's just like, wow, you're really like running with, like he's this kid with a very pure imagination, just running wild with this one very interesting device that's kind of specific, or at least on its surface seems very specific, but then becomes like a jack of all trades, a multi-tool of sorts. And I think not just, the problems that he faces or the villains that he finds himself up against, but it's also how does Spider-Man in this world solve this stuff. And I love the fact that with his narration, he's talking, or he's giving the play-by-play of what's going on with him and the villain, but at the same time thinking about, oh crap, I've got an exam I got to study for as well. So he's got this second tier motivation of, I need to stop the Green Goblin for two reasons. One, to save these people, and two, so I can get back home and study for my chem test the next morning. I like that addition onto him. And I also like the fact that sometimes like a Ditko or Lee would even incorporate like, oh, the stuff that I was studying in my chem test, oh, I can actually factor that in with my webbing to solve this problem against the Green Goblin. Yay, education.
That's why I liked Spider-Man and the Blue Power Ranger at the same time, because it was that kind of like, I was just starting school. So you know how the social change is different. You're used to spending all your time at home, and then you get into school and it's different. It's your whole life, or it's going to be your life for many, many years. But that was like an easy transition for me because it's like, oh, these two characters that I really like a lot at a very young age, it goes to show you like, oh, you can take these things, this book smarts that you learn in school, and apply them to the real world, and in some ways, apply them to superheroics and things of your dreams. So I think those are just small elements that really I can't really overlook their importance to me because for as much as I love Spider-Man, it's little stuff like that that keeps me loving Spider-Man.
One of the things I like to explore is like, well, okay, so we have this type of tech. It's really, really neat, really cool. It's got two basic parts. It's got the mechanical part of activation, and then it's got the chemistry part of the web fluid itself. And it's just like, well, how does he come up with this type of stuff? Like, he got these specialized web cartridges, right? So we talked about the asbestos stuff beforehand. I think he's also got like taser webbing, um,
Yeah.
and like acid webbing and magnetic webbing and all this type of stuff. So, um, what is there any type of thing for you as a comic fan of Spider-Man that you're like, have they done every variation of webbing in your eyes? Or is there one aspect that you haven't seen them do that could possibly be feasible with Spider-Man's web shooters?
If they ever do, this is just me pulling this out of thin air, but if they ever do like an alternate reality evil Spider-Man, it'd be neat if he could like have integrate the spots technology into webbing where he shoots like black hole webbing. I'm just saying that just randomly off the top of my head, but in reality, I don't know. I mean, I think that's the beauty of Spider-Man is he's not always prepared like Batman is, where he just kind of has to go. It's dependent on the villain or the scenario that he has to deal with, and that's what I really like. So in terms of that, I mean, trying to think what would be neat because the video game for PS4 does a great job of giving you all sorts of Spider-Man technology. He has his spider drones, his electric webs. There's fire webbing in the one video game. I honestly, I'm just trying to think because my first go-to in my brain for the webs is for Spider-Man to swing around on them or tie people up or make things like I was looking through an old issue where he creates a giant spider out of webbing and he like wraps webbing around some 2x4s and creates a spider to spook some thugs to get information out of them. But I mean, I would be open to any crazy variation of webbing as long as it served the story. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't like if Spider-Man sat down and went, I'm going to create this one in case I have to fight Hobgoblin and this one if I have to fight Electro. It's like, I kind of like the haphazard nature of Spider-Man always being on the go. Even in his personal life, he never really has a down moment. Either he's stressed out about Aunt May or Mary Jane or J. Jonah Jameson or Harry or something like that. So as long as it's just issue dependent, I'll be very open-minded to whatever they create. As long as it's not like, as long as it doesn't disrespect his intelligence and he doesn't have to go elsewhere for help.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things I think is quite inventive of for Spider-Man is that he takes that responsibility stuff to heart when it comes to solving his own problems. He's not trying to I rarely do I think of him ever being the type of guy who's like, I'm going to call up Reed Richards and have him fix this for me. It doesn't strike me as that's part of his character. It strikes me like, I came up with, I'm in this problem. This is my situation. I got to get myself out of it because it's the right thing to do. And I have the power to do it. How exactly will he accomplish that? He doesn't even know. And I think that's what brings about the drama that causes us to like a character such as Spider-Man. And in addition to, what sort of cool inventions he has. Cause I think, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but like Spider-Man, when he's facing off Venom, he's got like two basic tools at his disposal, Sonics and I think fire hurt
Yeah.
the symbiote. In the Spider-Man game, which we've talked about on your show once, the early 2000s one, I think you can get like a modification for like magnesium webbing, and that's what you do to take out some of the infected symbiote goons, right?
Yep.
And so yeah, that's a really cool I think technique because he adds magnesium to his webbing so he can like restrain Venom and later on Carnage and all that type of stuff. But another part of me is thinking like somewhere one day down the road there's going to be a story where the writer is going to find a weird way to incorporate like sonic webbing, and that's just going to mess with my head because I'm like, I don't understand how that would work. Is it like a guitar string type of thing and he just plucks it and creates a sonic vibration or something of
That'd
that
be
nature?
funny.
I mean, that'd be funny, but it's like, well, how powerful would that really be in comparison? Like, is Is that something that's beyond the realm of possibility given the rules so far established with the character and how he goes about using the tools at his disposal?
I believe that would be because he kind of falls into figuring out that Sonic's hurt the symbiote with the bell, or
Mm-hmm.
the in the cartoon the guys that have the weapon or whatever hurts him. I like maybe he could come up with like a concentrated sonic blast that would shoot out of his wrist or something. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here too because it's like I don't even does Spider-Man even fight symbiotes anymore? I don't read the modern books, so I'm just kind of like lost.
Neither do I. I would always think it'd be something he'd be using like the web tracker that he uses, right? Like because that gives out sends out a signal that he can follow. I would see like Peter Parker be the type of guy who's like, well, I'll use the web tracker and invert the signal to be a broadcaster and at high frequencies that maybe we can't hear, but the symbiote would hear. And that's the way I would think Spider-Man would solve a problem. I think this works in contrast to something which has come out recently, which is Into the Spider-Verse. We got the Miles Morales character. But one thing that I find kind of fascinating is that whereas in the Spider-Man stories, especially when you look at the Amazing Spider-Man and the Disney Spider-Man, there are moments where he has to manufacture his web fluid. We never get anything like that with Miles Morales. I don't even know if he knows how to make it.
Yeah, shit. I didn't even realize that was an issue. I've always looked at the character as like, oh, you're a derivative version, but he just kind of has it. I
Yeah.
Huh.
As far as I know, he just kind of has this. Like, and anyone out there listening, if he does make his own, it feels like it's very glossed over aspect because that's one of the things that makes Peter Parker Spider-Man is the invention of all those things. And I think that's probably one of the points of contention with regards to other people that judge Miles Morales. Is like, what has he contributed to Spider-Man as a character that is something that could be definitively his? And I think that's an issue that a lot of a lot of other writers have had prior to the existence of Miles Morales, especially during the Clone Saga when he had like Ben Riley clone, and he develops the Scarlet Spider, and I think his only contribution is like the spider stingers that shoots out of his wrist, if I'm
Hmm.
remembering that correctly.
Yeah, he has that, but
And it's like that's it. Like, I mean, where's there? They don't. That's the one thing that's very difficult when it comes to incorporating quote unquote like family members of the superhero is that you can't really bring anything special from the sidekick or the new partner or something that sets them up to be independent of the brand, so to speak, right? And I think that's what really hurt the Clone Saga so much.
oh, we don't say that around here. We don't talk about the Clone Saga. Oh.
Yeah, it's painful, right? Because it's like, oh, in concept, it seems cool. You're creating doubt for your audience as to who is who and what's going to happen, whatnot. And then it's like, oh, all you're doing is building on that doubt. You're not having fun with the reveals or the answers. And for some reason, MJ's kid is kidnapped, and you're like, what? So you're thrown all over the place. But I mean, that's one of the things why I felt like, okay, people like the Scarlet Spider because he's a different look, is cool, it's kind of like he's kind of like a different form of street level hero, like Spider-Man is. Um, but what's his contribution to the overall lore of the character that sets him apart from Peter Parker? And all I could ever come up with is spider stingers and the fact that he's blonde.
I never got into the character ever as a kid. I was always just like, that's not Spider-Man. I want the real Spider-Man. Even at
Yeah.
5 years old.
Oh yeah, no, totally on board with that. And I think that's kind of the problem here is that it's you're not having fun with the inventive nature of what Peter Parker means to the character of Spider-Man with his web shooters, with his spider light, with his spider trackers, with the way he experiments with his web fluid and how he solves his problems and the research he does and his dedication to learning and trying to be the man that his parents and his aunt and uncle are trying to raise. All those things factor into what make the character, and the inventiveness and creativeness is like channeled through him to his technology. But when we look at all the other characters that have been sort of trying to do their own Spider-Man stuff, even as far as like the variations of Spider-Woman, like Spider-Woman, Arachne, and all those others, the Silk I think is another one. they
Yeah.
they don't do anything as inventive or creative to have fun with the premise. And I think that's kind of why you have this loyal fan base to argue that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, because he's done it all. Like he's the foundation. Anyone that comes in afterwards is always going to feel like a derivative. especially if they don't have anything to contribute. And sadly, the only thing we're seeing that differentiates them is in some of them they have slightly different powers. Like I think Arachne has like psychic webbing, or at least one of the Spider Women have psychic webbing, and Miles Morales has like a genetic stinger shock and then can turn invisible. And it's like, well, those aren't of the invention of the characters doing. They're just powers they happen to have. Like, how often do you hear stories, Spider-Man stories, that are dependent on Spider-Man having his spider sense and his super strength and his being able to stick to walls? I feel like those are not as useful to solving problems for Spider-Man compared to the stuff that is very intelligence dependent, right?
I agree with that. I mean, but then again, too, I think, like, for example, if you say his spider sense to save a story or to save the day in a story, I think a lot of that has to do with his intelligence, too, because he has to figure out how to then apply it in a certain scenario. Like, there's an early issue where he just turns off the lights
Mm-hmm.
and he fights some guy in the pitch black. There's like nothing. They just show Spider-Man's like outline and a couple lines to denote him in the shadows, but he uses his spider sense to get through. But I think that all has to come from his intelligence to understand how other people would react in the dark or how light refracts or this or that. I mean, and also too, every other the versions of these derivative Marvel characters, it's like with Miles Morales, he can turn invisible. You mean just like the symbiote could? Like they're just pulling stuff from other places and other sources. And there's a reason why Spider-Man will be around, 60 years now. And other characters, just people don't talk about him. They have to look and be associated with the brand name of Spider-Man. They can't stand on their own. They haven't created a new Marvel hero that's completely different in a long time. I mean, I could even be like an old man and say, since Deadpool came out, has Marvel not created a new character that actually is different? And I think there's a lot to be said about this. Everybody is a derivative. Everyone's another Marvel, a Miss Marvel, a Captain Marvel, a Photon, all this shit. They're the same characters.
Mm-hmm.
They switch costumes and they do stuff and they just lump them together. It's like if you go to McDonald's and you get a cheeseburger and then they give you 2 extra ones and they expect you to eat them and you're like, I'm kind of full. I don't feel good after eating all 3 of them. Yeah, because one was enough. And that's how I feel about Spider-Man. One is enough. You can have a million different X-Men characters, but there's only one Wolverine. You don't need a daughter and a son and this and that. Oh, they have different powers. This one has 2 claws instead of 3. This one's got real claws instead of adamantium. And it's still not Wolverine. That's where Marvel dies right now.
No, I mean, I think that's its own failing, is the fact that I mean, you have two aspects. You have our own mortality as individuals and our own limitations. And at 60 years with a character, you do explore. That's a long time to explore a lot of stories, and you're going to get to a point where it's like, well, where else can you really go? And unfortunately, what we've seen, especially on the big side of comic things, is the derivative nature of, well, we'll just make another version of this, only they look this way, and we'll see if we can address different problems. Failing to realize that the problems of the superficial nature are the ones that don't sell. Like Peter Parker's problems were not always as superficial as you'd expect them to be. There's helping to contribute to the bills so that he and Aunt May can keep on to the house after Ben dies, because his own insurance and everything else just was not enough to cover the expenses that were happening in the family. And, Peter has to reconcile that with the fact that, oh, he's also paying for school and he wants to have a future in the stuff that he's passionate about in the field of science. And he doesn't know where it's going to take him exactly, but he knows that if he gets this education, gets this knowledge, makes these connections with on the school side of things, and goes out to the world, he could create a career and take care of the people he loves. But at the same time, he's got the responsibilities of these spider powers, where when things happen in the city that are out of the realm of the normal first responders, he's got to step up and contribute to do what is right, at least not just by himself, but for the memory of his Uncle Ben and the people he cares about. Where do we get those types of parallels in the newer characters, and why do we also not get any of the inventive nature with the tools that they have to solve those problems? Like that's why I like talking about Peter Parker, the web shooters, and all of his gadgets and the versatility, is because it really broadens the character, and it makes us as an audience not just impressed with the ingenuity, but also stimulates our imaginations as to like, well, what could he do next? And maybe you get that get lucky that one time when you come up with a new gimmick for Spider-Man to solve, and maybe 5-10 issues down the road, the writers are like, "Yep, we're doing this now." And you're like, "Oh, I knew he could do that, and my things are confirmed. I'm learning with Peter," and you just got that excitement and that connectivity to it. I think that's what makes the character really powerful.
I agree with that. I think a lot of these inconsistencies and holes, if we'll call them, because it comes from the writers of the writers trying to make it. It's like with the problem with the Force Awakens, where they try to create these heroes that are essentially the audience on the screen or on the page, where it's like, oh, they're gonna know everything. It's fun. It's this. It's that. Like it's supposed to kind of stink to be these heroes, and we have to show them how they work their way out of these bad situations. But now that they've created nothing but superheroes that are based on the idea that it's always fun and exciting and it's escapism and this and that from reality, it's like they're never put in scenarios that that adds weight to the situation, and that also comes that you can add that into the whole the web shooters and the way you use the technology to be supplemented by your own intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the people take it that deep, and they need to take it that deep.
Yeah, because I like the fact that as you mentioned earlier with the Amazing Spider-Man cartoon in the 80s, where the commercial break would be Spider-Man falling and he's out of web fluid. It's like, oh, there's a consequence to the technology. It's not unlimited. It's not a crutch for Spider-Man. It's an actual tool. And if he finds himself in a situation where if he's out of web fluid or if the bad guy crushes his web shooters, he's now down a tool. And now he's back on to not just his strength and his agility, it's still back to his mind. Is like, okay, my tools are gone. My web shooters are gone. The one thing I can use to restrain or contain or annoy or pester my adversary is done. All I've got left is my wits and my smart mouth.
And that's enough, because he has taken down villains by annoying them and making them flustered. So that's not out of the realm of possibility for good old Spidey, which that just adds to his incredible repertoire of weapons, metaphorically speaking, with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had mixed feelings about this, because it's like one part of me, he's either the older age of side of a teenager, like 18, 19, or he's in the early 20s, so he's still got that sense of immaturity around him, but he's also terrified beyond his wits, and justifiably so. And he throws out these sort of quips and insults to throw off the balance of his adversaries to gain an advantage and save the people around him. But one of the things that I always had as a point of contention is that he kind of, once he solves that problem or stops that bad guy, he kind of, unless it's like Harry Osborn, he kind of just forgets about them. And as a result, like he doesn't say, oh, I'm trying to help you, or I'm trying to do this. Well, Kurt Connors is another exception actually onto that as well. But unless there's like a personal connection for Peter to these characters, he's really like a one and done. Like he'll web up the shocker and be like, okay, say some sort of quippy insult, and then the cops will take him away. And he's like, okay, that problem's done, until he comes back again. But he won't actually go to the shock and be like, why are you getting hired by these goons, these stupid, greedy, corrupt people to do their bidding where you're the one getting punished by me, when you could do something more lucrative and more meaningful with your life. Like he doesn't have that approach. And I thought, oh, that's a one area of Spider-Man that I haven't quite seen in the comics. And it may have been something incorporated between the time I stopped reading and now. But I always thought, like, there's an angle, like the mature Spider-Man, so to speak, the nurturing Spider-Man, the guidance of Spider-Man, where he's like, I'm sick and tired of fighting, Flint Marco every Thursday for the last couple of years. What if I figure out why he keeps going to doing this stuff and then solve that problem?
It's funny that you bring up the Sandman, because that actually did happen probably 07, 08, 09, somewhere in the first decade of the 2000s. That was a thing where your adjective version of Spider-Man, I would definitely read The Nurturing Spider-Man. That would be a fun book. But the same thing with the Rhino too. There's a couple, like, they took those classic villains and they tried to humanize them and have them go deeper with them, because I guess the Marvel thought was, it's been almost 50 years. How can we keep having Spider-Man fight the same people over and over again? And then it got to the point where he did try to help him, and he took it one step further with guys like Sandman. He had this daughter that he was trying to see, which was borrowed from the movie, but either way, it was better in the book. And then the stuff with the Rhino was the best. Like, the Rhino got clean. He took a life away from crime. He had a girlfriend. I think it was his wife actually, and then she was killed by the mob or somebody, and then he came back to it. But like it showed Spider-Man take an interest. He's like, I thought you had your life clean. I thought you did this. I thought you had that. And then he's like, oh, she was taken from me. And even though Spider-Man ultimately has to stop him again, he kind of goes, oh, I understand why.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's a little bit of that there, but then there's this dumb crap. Like, I argue the Dan Slott, the anything really post like 2011, 2012 Spider-Man, it really just kind of just Amber Heard's the bed up and takes away all the growth or anything that's mildly interesting from the modern era of the character.
Yeah, I actually I recently read Renew Your Vows, which I think was written by Dan Slott, if memory serves. And I thought the concept was good, but the execution was pretty lame personally. Um
I gave up reading it. Like I bought the first issue or two and then I stopped.
yeah, like apparently the whole world is taken over by this guy who has managed to assimilate the various powers of other superheroes and mutants. And I guess as advanced as the technology is, he can't retain the powers for very long. So he needs Spider-Man's powers to somehow do that. And Spider-Man has been in hiding, and their daughter has been developing powers and breaking I guess the dampeners that detects them and all that stuff. And it just kind of goes crazy because towards the end, it's literally Spider-Man, Mary Jane, and his daughter. And Mary Jane's stolen some sort of super suit, and they're all fighting the bad guy at the end.
Ugh.
But it does this one thing where Peter's given the option to kill the bad guy, but he doesn't. He just subdues him, and it plays with the idea that if the bad guy managed to actually harm his daughter, he probably would have finished him off. And it's like that just feels disingenuous. It just feels like a lot of convoluted natures and this weird fake world, and it just didn't feel like Spider-Man, or at least it didn't feel like a Peter Parker Spider-Man at this age with understanding this responsibility. I think that's the one aspect that's kind of been untapped that sadly I don't think Marvel writers have really gotten is you have this kid who has to be technologically savvy. And what I liked about Spider-Man, at least from some of the stories I've seen in the comics and in the interpretations in animation and at some points live action, is that he has to go into a direction where his savviness goes beyond just the education spectrum and goes into the craziness that is human emotion and human relationships. I always felt it kind of weird, but also very appropriate at the end of the first Spider-Man film when Mary Jane is like, "Yeah, I love you, Peter," and Peter does the right things like saying, "Yeah, I don't love you," because every example he has had with Mary Jane in their interactions, she likes him, but she doesn't really care about him or show any type of actual interest in him. It's always been him on her, and then she just kind of switches on a dime to say that she likes Peter. And I mean, the smart person is like, wait a minute, if you're that flexible with your emotions, I don't think I'm going to trust you in a relationship. And I thought that was kind of great, even though they framed it as like, oh no, I'm going to do this to protect you because I can't, these powers are a curse or what have you. And I think the untapped art, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, Jeff, but I think the untapped art for Peter is to realize they're only a curse as you're starting to learn them, but once you master them, they become a benefit.
I agree with that. I agree with that completely, actually. Modernizing Spider-Man is such a difficult thing because it's also just written by people that don't really live in the modern world. I think a lot of these are, and I don't want to say it's an age thing because I think the better, if you were to have like seasoned comic writers and modern people work on Spider-Man, I think the seasoned people would do the character better.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's just something missing in the lives of the people who create these days because they always say lived experiences make the best art. I don't think a lot of these people have the lived experience to make Spider-Man interesting. I'm not saying World War II was this great thing that every generation needs to have, but the war, people lived a lot at a young age back then. A lot of things happened.
Mm-hmm.
Today, it's much different. It's much more mild by today's standard or by those standards. And so I think you just kind of have a failure to launch in certain ways. It's just kind of like, oh, nothing really happens. These characters aren't that deep or complex. They don't know how to make them do those or have those deeper emotions. So I agree with the way you say that.
So that actually reminds me of something, because I know you and I have both seen into Across the Spider-Verse. I'm not too thrilled by it, but one of the things I think we should bring up is the fact that Miles Morales' parents, they have the son of a 15-year-old, and what is the common thread between the father and the mother with regards to the son is that he's growing up too fast, and that they wish he could be a kid longer. And I'm wondering, because this has been kind of a theme that a lot of stories have had. It's definitely been something I've observed in my own life and with my friends' life, where the parents, complain that we as their children are growing up too fast. And I'm wondering, is this type of a subtle form of like desire for arrested development in our current generation, where the parents want to hold on to the precious moments of innocence, and as a result, maybe it's having an effect on other parts of the population where they're holding on to their immaturity as they get physically older. And therefore, that experience that you just brought up about, conflict and difficulty, and the bigger, broader world around us has been pushed further away. And as a result, we're seeing those same limitations in our characters, especially with Spider-Man, and in the case of Across the Spider-Verse, Miles Morales.
Oh, we very much are. I mean, let's just look at the real world right now. People are so immature. People don't really have to grow up, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing that you don't grow up. And in some cases, it's a good thing to like never lose that childlike wonder or this or
Mm-hmm.
that. But there's also something to be said to your point. I mean, look at Peter Parker at what is he, 16 when he got the powers or whatever. So he had to he had to worry about family income and helping this and social things. Like now everyone just kind of hangs out and does their own thing. And I mean, not to get into the real world stuff too deep because I don't want to, turn it into one of those discussions. But like that's kind of what we're living in right now. Just kind of take a step outside, go on the internet, interact with people that way. It's very much regressive in that light, and our characters are the same way. The most interesting characters out there aren't going to necessarily be based on what modern people are like these days, because the conflicts, the struggles, the things are very minuscule or very boring or mundane in the real world, and then to put that on the page, it's less exciting. It's kind of like I can't even get a good example of it. It's just very boring. I mean, these characters, they don't stand the test of time. They used to be inspirational and aspirational. A lot of the DC ones were aspirational, and some of the Marvel ones too, but there's like nothing you can get from these characters. Like growing up, I would look at Spider-Man and go, oh man, him using his smarts, to jump back to the beginning of our show, him using his smarts made it, I understood why you should study hard in school or this or that. Or I would pick up what I would consider positive traits from the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is there anything even in like more modern stuff these days? It's almost just like, forget your family, forget your past, forget this, forget who you are. It's like the people that write this crap just don't even know what they're trying to say. And this whole desire for Miles to stay a child, I think that's the least interesting part, because all they're trying to do is flip everything with Miles Morales is just the flip of Peter Parker. It's like he was thrust, this was thrust upon him and he had to grow up quickly. And now his safe family life wants him to stay a child and this and that. And it's like, that's not interesting. I mean, you know the hero's journey better than I would, but I mean, how many of the great journeys start with, oh, I'm very comfortable and I stay comfortable and everybody wants me to be comfortable. Now look at Luke Skywalker. He's got an adventure, it does a desire for adventure in his destiny, and then his aunt and uncle are killed, and he's like, I gotta grow up real quick. And then he goes off to become this great hero that millions and millions of people have looked up to for decades and decades. But then you just have these other like coddled, protected characters that don't do anything. And conflict is what creates an interesting narrative, not comfort.
Very, very true.
Nobody reads a story about, like, unless it's like an autobiographical comic, but very few people are sitting there reading stories about, and then I drank coffee with my dad and it was the nicest day we've ever had. Like, no, the interesting story is the fight you had or the time that you ran away from home or this or that. Those are the interesting things, not this whole lack of anything. It's so boring. It's so boring and repetitive.
Well, yes, Alfred Hitchcock said it best, which is that drama is life with the boring parts cut out. And what we getting in some aspects are boring parts, and it's trying to be sold to us as character development, which I'm sorry to say, talking about yourself or talking about another character, especially one in the room, is not really character development. Character development comes from choices. And I think You hit the nail on the head there with the fact that Peter Parker was a kid who is happy being a kid, but when he gets these powers and he loses Uncle Ben, the real world is thrust upon him far earlier than he was ever prepared for. And our interest in Peter is how is he going to survive this change? It's the same thing with regards to something like Bruce Wayne, where as a kid, he loses his parents right in front of his eyes. And as a result, he loses his innocence as a child and he has a choice to make. He could live off the wealth that his parents had left him and be like JD Salinger or some sort of jet setting guy across the world to hide his pain through various vices. But what makes him different and interesting is the fact that he decides, no, I'm going to dedicate my life to making sure the very thing that happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else ever again. And it's like, that's compassion. And that's also a very mature response and maybe one he's not prepared for as a child and he has to work his way up to it, but it's his goal and driving force. And for Peter, he's functioning in a similar capacity. He's functioning as a point of regret where he was given these powers that gave him a little bit closer to maturity and he failed to handle it responsibly. And as a result, he has paid the ultimate price, which is losing a mentor and father figure whom he loved dearly. And now he's got to go on without their guidance anymore. He has to rely on everything that he remembers from him up until that point. And that's now a limited form of knowledge compared to the mentor, which potentially has unlimited form of knowledge to give the hero. Like Obi-Wan has all this knowledge to impart on Luke throughout his journey. And when he gets to this point where Obi-Wan's saying, you know what, I've taught you all I can teach you. You're on your own. And Luke is like, well, no, there's definitely more. And he knows there's more. And that's the path to wisdom is the fact that Luke admits he knows nothing still. But because he's able to admit that in that little control room scene before Obi-Wan leaves, Obi-Wan knows he's left him in good hands. And then towards the end, when he's holding off Darth Vader and fighting, he's like, he sees Luke, he knows he's there. He's like, I can give up because as soon as I give up, Luke will actually finally leave the Death Star and continue on the journey that I have set forth for him. And you don't get those types of things anymore. We get the parents are like, no, just be 15 forever. I don't even want you to leave the borough in New York. I don't want you leaving Brooklyn to go to school. I want you to I want you to stay here. And for Miles, he's like, I'm going to New Jersey. That's hop, skip, and a jump away. But to the parents, they don't want to accept that. And even though that is a great situation for conflict, the fact of the matter is that it's really it feels more like the kids wanting to grow up so fast, uh, and that they know better of growing up that fast, as opposed to the parents where they're not exploring that concept, which is that the parents are like, the real world is dangerous, and if I could keep you here, I would, and that would make them a good antagonist because the one thing that they're doing is they're conflating the idea of protecting kids with preparing kids. And I think that's kind of what the mentor is. The mentor is preparing you to for the world ahead and not protecting you and that's what I liked about the relationship. Man, you bring up Star Wars and we're going to go Star Wars. So let's do it. I like the relationship between Owen, Lars, and Beru versus Obi-Wan, where Owen and Beru are like, we're going to protect you. We're going to keep you here on the farm. We're going to teach you the skills to be a farmer, to be self-sufficient, but you're never going to leave this planet. And we think that's the right thing to do. And it ends up being a horrible thing because he's never going to grow as a character when you're in that situation. And as a person, you're not going to grow. But Obi-Wan is like, you know what? Yeah, you should come with me to the Alderaan system. Let's go. Let's see what you got out there. I can teach you things to survive. But you're going to see some really crazy stuff. and yes, it's dangerous, but I'm confident in who you are. And I'm confident in my ability to teach you that you're going to weather it and persevere. And you'd never get that type of mentality from the characters of Owen and Lars, which I would say would be like the overbearing parents, the distrustful parents, if you will. And that could have been the gimmick that would have made Miles Morales a more interesting character if he had distrustful parents that just had no confidence in their child, which is a reflection on them as parents, meaning that they failed their kid. They're not confident to let the kid go off on his own. That says something about the parents more than does the kid. At least that's my perspective of it.
I agree with that. And I never really thought about that scene in depth until about now, because there are many reasons I didn't enjoy that movie, but it is frustrating we are influenced by what we watch and what we see, and now we're just watching a new generation of people are just watching things about like, oh, just don't grow it. It really does have a weird negative adverse effect because if something bigger were to happen, I'm not saying a war or anything like that, but if something bigger were to happen or some kind of crisis, what would the people do? Kind of like now, they just kind of roll up into a ball and don't do anything. They just kind of sit around and wait. They don't. Nobody really goes out and gets stuff or does anything. It's like the select few who do will have the results they desire. Everyone else just sits around and waits. And I don't think that's necessarily a great thing to put in a superhero comic book because for as much as they are throwaway basic entertainment, they're also very much mini morality tales or many things like that that you can slightly learn from or look up to. And I don't think you need to be raising your kids learning from a comic book, but I don't think a comic book having a naturally positive message is a bad thing per se.
Oh, exactly. Oh, I totally agree with that. I mean, the a naturally positive message is a good thing. I think exploring the idea of what is that phrase? Good things come to those who wait. I think there's a very I think people taking that too literally is what causes the issues, especially within our stories. Like you don't want your character to wait. You're basically it's basically teaching you like patience. Things will come to you, or opportunities will present themselves, and then you have to seize on them. And you only do that by making yourself a little vulnerable by going out of your comfort zone to search for those opportunities. And it's going to take time. It's not going to be instant. It's not going to be as gratifying as you would expect, but it's one stepping stone towards that next journey, that next milestone, that next adventure that you could have that could be very fulfilling and rewarding. And I liked the fact that fictional characters kind of, or at least used to, sort of massage you subtly in that direction through various allegorical tales. I mean, what's more entertaining than the period where Peter Parker's applying to all of his colleges, and now he's like, "Oh, great! Now it's out of my hands. It's all in theirs, and I gotta wait and see which ones will accept me, which ones won't." And he's being stressed out over that. At the same time, he's having to fight, Scorpion. you know, and it's like, oh yeah, you've got this part where he's like, my future. Like he'll crack jokes. It's like, I'm waiting for my college applications, but I don't, or my college acceptance letters or whatever, or rejection letters. But if I don't, but two things could happen. If they all reject me, I'm going to wish Scorpion to kill me. And if they don't, then I'll be glad that I won. And those are kind of the funny, witty aspects to show priorities and goals for a character.
They are. They really are. I miss. I mean, there's so much that's lacking in a lot of characters these days. They should. I mean, you don't want to copy everything, but they should definitely keep all those aspects in mind when creating, especially derivative characters. Because if you're gonna give me the same thing, don't take out the good parts and give me superficial crap. Like, figure it out. Take the time. It's the marketing departments in a lot of these places that are, well, Spider-Man's popular. We need more Spider-Man. How do we give you more Spider-Man? The suit. That's all that matters. No, because these things mean a lot to a lot of people. And look at how, I'm not saying the Spider-Verse is divisive, but it's definitely not as universally praised if you take, a look on the internet as the other parts of the press would make you think. And I think a lot of that has to do with just what it's lacking, stuff we're talking about, and even more.
Given Peter's ingenuity and his invention, and the fact that he has gone through, I would say, 4 stages so far. He's gone through the high school stage, he's gone through the college stage, he's gone through the adult single stage, and now he's in the married family stage. I mean, I think that's kind of fascinating for a character because it's a different type of growing arc that you would otherwise not see so much in other characters. I think that's what makes Spider-Man and Peter Parker specifically very alluring, is that even though it's slow over the period, he does kind of grow with the audience to a degree.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at those old classic letters pages, the number one most requested story was Peter graduating from high school. It had been a couple of years. People had, been reading the book for 3 or 4 years, maybe, maybe 2 or 3. But either way, they wanted to grow with him, and they were, and look at the there's an old Rolling Stone article that tells you like these characters were very popular on college campuses. Like that was the age group that was really reading a lot of this stuff in the beginning as well. And that's at a stage in your life where you're about growing. You're still a kid legally in some parts of, some people go to college earlier than that. And in many ways, you think you're an adult when you're in college too. And it's interesting to read about a character who thinks they're an adult but isn't, or thinks they're not an adult but is. Like it all depends on how it's portrayed. But I think those are elements that really are integral to this character, and should other characters that are going to be at a similar age or a similar point in their life find a way to balance and add that in.
That is very well said. I really like that because
Thank you.
it's yeah, because you got the parallel. I mean, what's cooler is the fact that you could be a college student reading Spider-Man in college, say in the 70s, and thinking, yeah, I'm an adult now. I'm in college, I'm learning, I'm on my own for the first time. And then you read a Spider-Man book where Peter's doing the same thing, and then the end of the story is like, yeah, you're really not an adult yet, kid. And then he was a college student reading, was like, holy crap, maybe I'm not as grown up as I think I am. Um, and there's value to that because it's every once in a while we with whatever age we're at always just need that little polite reality check, especially one that yeah, sure, can get under hit your ego just a little bit, but at the same time it's like, no, this is going to fortify me as an adult because I've got to, remember what's really happening around me, and not assume that I've got it all together right away. Which is what I remember my experience in college, my first year. I was thinking, okay, I'm finally on my own. I don't have to worry about nagging parents or the minutia of their obligations to interrupt mine. I can actually focus on myself and what I want to do. And then you realize, oh man, I'm a mess. And you don't have it all together, and you got to sort it out. It's a great relatable aspect for a character to see in characters like Spider-Man, because that guy is always struggling with something, and when he does accomplish one goal, 3 or 4 more obstacles come rolling in, whether they are supervillain related or they're just the normal responsibilities of adulthood. So as we run this off, the last part of the subject I wanted to address with regards to Spider-Man and his inventiveness is that where do you think would be, like, of all the stories that you've read of Spider-Man and the things that kind of have shown any sort of consistencies, is there anything there that you would suggest as a Spider-Man fan that feels authentic to Peter? Like what do you think would be the career goal for him? Would it be on the academic side of employment, or on the practical side of things? Would he be like making a business, or would he be a teacher or something? Like what do you think would be a best fit for Peter, given your experience with the character?
I always enjoyed him as a teacher. There was a run in the early 2000s. I'm terrible when it comes to the writers, but John Romita Jr. was the artist at the time. But he was teaching elementary school. I'm not saying he couldn't teach at a higher level, but I really liked how basically what Spider-Man's trying to do, or what Peter's trying to do when he's Spider-Man, is, make amends for the wrong that he let Uncle Ben die and the guilt that he feels. But if you look deeper, you got to look at the impact that Uncle Ben had on his life. And I think the impact, if Peter Parker can have a similar impact on other people's lives like Uncle Ben did for his, then he'll create a better society on the grand scheme of things. When they made him an industrialist like Tony Stark, it was stupid. I mean, we're talking about the application of webbing, the worst one. That I literally put down Spider-Man forever since then. I haven't bought a new issue. He fell from outer space. He made a web ball, fell through the planet's atmosphere, and then bounced and survived. I was like, this is the dumbest crap ever. But I just don't buy industrial. It was terrible, man. Industrial Spider-Man. Like, there was a moment in time where he worked at a lab for a guy named Max Modell, and there was like a social circle. I liked that. But the whole element of Peter Parker never being able to show up on time, and then he becomes the superior Spider-Man, all of that fell apart. I think he works best as a teacher, just trying to essentially be an Uncle Ben to as many kids as possible. That's where I like the character. But you also write yourself into a corner when you're trying to create a character that basically every 28 days has a new adventure, and you need to do it forever. I mean, school is fine, but how many issues can you tell where he always is on time for class? That's kind of boring. How many issues can you tell where no kid ever gets in danger? Like, after a while, you got to raise the stakes to keep people reading, but then you also have to think about the realistic element of, would he hang it up to protect these kids? Is he doing better by doing this? Mm-hmm. Or how long would it take for someone to find out the secret identity and he loses his job and all of his credibility and this and that? So maybe the best for the character would be some kind of applied sciences at a place where it's not as corporate, or what would be corporate, obviously, but it wouldn't be as like kind of like in Ghostbusters when he talks about, I've seen the private sector, they demand results. maybe putting him in a situation where he could be in that sector, but not necessarily always be in danger, or his job always be in danger. Like maybe find a way to separate that, because for a career for the character, like I still like the photographer, but what do you do in modern day photography? Everybody just shoots it and emails it in or uploads it to a memory card or this or that. It's like they tried the whole modernizing thing with the webmaster in Ultimate Spider-Man, and that worked. That was cool,
Mm-hmm.
but he was also a kid forever in that book, and then he dies. And nowadays, he would have to have something. What is a modern day like? I did think yesterday or the other day when I was reading a Spider-Man comic, I thought to myself, if they were to reboot Spider-Man, you could have him be like, hear me out for a second. You could do something with social media where he finds a way to fake an identity and then basically makes money off of this Spider-Man web persona. Like that was the first thing I could think of. I was like, how would you do shit like that? And I'm not saying I want that or necessarily like it, but you got to look at what the modern day equivalent of a photographer for a newspaper was, because Jimmy Olsen was a cub reporter for the Daily Planet. And I guess working in the press was cool. But nowadays, being an influencer is kind of cool. So maybe just give him that kind of thing. I don't, I can't go any deep. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head like that. What about you?
Well, I mean, to piggyback off your idea, you'd essentially have Spider-Man live streaming his rescues,
Yes,
essentially,
exactly.
and
And he could run it through a VPN and no one could trace him.
run it through a VPN. No one can trace it. It's like a burner phone of sorts. And then, because again, I think the competition between, say, photographers and people with cell phones is the fact that, your paparazzi type photographer just doesn't always isn't always able to capture those moments that sometimes a random person with a cell phone can. And I
Exactly.
think that'd be something interesting to explore for Peter Parker, especially if you say, let's make Peter Parker a 45-year-old guy with a kid. He's still a freelance photographer making good, decent money. And then the smartphone comes out and he's like, oh crap, I can't get exclusive pictures of Spider-Man anymore, even though I know exactly where I'm going to be at any given time. Because all these people with cell phones are getting angles that I can't always get when I web up a camera somewhere and put it on a timer. And so he's now out of a job. So where would that leave him? And I think that'd be funny if he's like, okay, now Peter Parker would end up losing his Peter Parker persona because he'd have to live stream himself on social media, web slinging through New York and then stopping crimes. And there's lots of fun to explore of that nature, but you also have the pitfalls of what it means to be a social media influencer, which is you've got to be online for a lot of your day. And then you'd have that thing as like, well, Spider-Man is taking over Peter Parker. And I think that would be an interesting conflict to explore. Because
I'd read that.
you're essentially looking at like, oh, he's live streaming this. He's using like a YouTube, Twitter, or whatever equivalent there is out there, where the more views and the more watch time generates ad revenue income, which then supports him for his crime fighting abilities. And then on top of that, he has to go through a whole bunch of series of moving that money around so it can't be traced to him as Peter Parker. And then he's realizing all I'm doing is spending 8 hours web slinging throughout New York, stopping crimes, but I'm neglecting my wife and my kid to do this. Those are some interesting problems. And then you also have the other problem, which is that anyone that's trying, like J. Jonah Jameson, can't really slander him too much because you've got video proof of him stopping the bad guy. And so now you have the credibility of the press being brought into question too, which is also kind of a good allegorical statement for modern times. So you just stumbled onto a very interesting angle for a Spider-Man story that would be really, really inventive to read.
Well, like I always tell you, I'm working on this big idea for a comic and a character, and some of this stuff blends into that. So I'm always thinking about that kind of a thing. So once you read the thing and see the thing I'm talking about, you'll go, oh, now it all makes sense why we had all these conversations for years, specifically about certain things. It's like you'll know when you read it, like this shit all what went into it. So believe me, I'm at a point now where I just study these things academically. I study them from a thematic standpoint. Comics have become less of a, they're still entertaining, don't get me wrong here, but
Mhm.
they've become less about just sitting down and escaping into a fictional world than it is, well, let me see how this structure fits on 3 pages, or let me see how this feathered line works, or let me see how you can tell this story over the course of 50 pages versus the course of 35 pages. So believe me, I'm always like, I may be the YouTube stuff all the time for the main job right now, but in the back of my mind, I'm always kind of piecing together to create these things that are of. Because here's the thing too, I don't want to sound crazy, but like, even though a lot of the Marvel stuff is very timeless, they're also very much of their day. And you got to always keep in mind why they were successful and why these things work, because they were able to have their finger on the pulse, but then have the one foot in the past and the other foot in the future. And I think that's one of the places that modern comics are lacking in. They're just kind of living in this, I don't know, this like never ending loop of like self congratulatory repetition where it's like, oh, we did it again. Yay. You gotta figure out what's going to make these characters work in the modern age, and then figure out how to stretch it for as long as you can before then you have to re-update without necessarily changing. Like Spider-Man was a photographer for like 30 years, and then with the prevalence of the internet, they finally felt the need to have to change it. But then, they turned it into things that he became Iron Man essentially. And you really betrayed the character and the audience who spent decades reading the character. Because if we wanted Iron Man, we would have read Iron Man. If I wanted Iron Man, I'd been buying those books since I was a child. But I'd never read a single Iron Man comic until close to the movie because I wasn't a fan. I watched the cartoon and played with the toys. Iron Man is not my favorite. So that's something I think that Marvel and anybody that really makes a new character or uses a legacy character, they need to keep in mind.
To your point, there is something to say about understanding what's happening now, but identifying the things that are occurring presently that seem to be part of a repeated pattern or part of a universal lesson that's over and over again, which is what I think helped Spider-Man grow and other comic characters of that time grow over those decades and become stories you go back to, is because it's like maybe it is of their time, but you see how similar the aspects of that time are reflected in the present day. And if you stay too close to the present day and don't approach what the universal conflicts are, then you risk being dated so to the point where you're actually obsolete or irrelevant. And one thing that I have enjoyed with this conversation is like with the inventiveness of his gimmicks, of his gadgets and his uses, and the weird kind of stories of who he is as a character. They're very timeless in nature because it's about the growth of the individual that is what keeps people coming back, not so much the superficiality of what's happening with the modern fads, so to speak. I mean, I don't recall Spider-Man altering his costume to have bell bottoms and high and platform shoes in the 70s because that was the hip thing to do. Maybe Peter dressed that way, but it didn't go over to Spider-Man, right?
Right. They gave him sideburns and whatever mild, modern, stylish haircut. They
Mm-hmm.
let everyone else in the real world reflect the real world, but that character, yeah, I mean, in the '80s they didn't make Spider-Man look like a Tron character. They didn't make in the '90s in the '90s they did try to do augmented reality crap, but that's a whole topic for another day. The '90s were where comic books kind of tripped over themselves, and they're still trying to pick themselves up from all the missteps of the 1990s, both creatively and business wise.
Oh, absolutely. I liken it to someone tied their shoelaces together and they just haven't figured out how to undo the knot yet. Um, so yeah, I think that's quite an important aspect when it comes to the modern day take is to challenge is to when you're looking at the stuff that's coming out in current era, it's like, okay, well, what's the abstract of this? What's the allegory going on? I'm reminded like when we were talking about Miles Morales, we have the kid that wants to grow up too fast. I'm like, that's a good allegorical thing, but how are they really playing with it? And are they doing a challenge where they're actually going to make that character face what the consequences of growing up too fast actually is and what the responsibilities are? But then we see with the parents that they're there to be the safeguard to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's like, well, now you just cut the entire allegorical aspect of that story out. There's no wind in the sails for that one. And now we're just going to be kind of circling the drain, so to speak, or spinning your wheels in mud where you're not actually going to get any real growth out of the character, which is unfortunate.
It is, and people are going to champion it, and we're just basically promoting lesser versions, and then it's like when you make a copy of the videotape. It's like the source, the master tape's going to look pristine, but then you copy the copy and the copy of the copy, and you lose stuff in the process, and then you're left with a really bad picture quality. And
Yeah.
I think that's where you're getting with entertainment or just art in general.
And rarely are you going to have Michael Keaton being able to shave you in your sleep and then give you a fake razor with no blade in it to shave the following morning. That's a little multiplicity reference out there. uh,
I saw the new Batman or the new Flash movie compared to Multiplicity.
yeah. I mean, well, there you go. I mean, that's the one thing is when you do copies of the copies, you lose an essence of what makes the thing you're copying special. I think that's what happened there. We got so many people that make the argument that the superhero name is a mantle that can be passed on, but they're missing the concept is like someone has to contribute something new to earn the mantle and let it come through. But at the end of the day, the mantle and the person that made it, or the character that made it, essentially, they are, one and the same. Bruce Wayne is Batman. Logan is, or James Howlett is Wolverine. However you want to reconcile it that way. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. They are the creators in their own universe of that identity. That is theirs. That is intimately theirs. To be able to treat it as a commodity or something relatively disposable that can be passed from one person to another is kind of hollowing out the spirit of what that character is.
I agree with that. And it bothers me as a fan of these to just watch. Here, it's a double sided, a two edged sword or whatever you want to say. I'm sorry, but it's like I'm happy that people call this out, and I'm also frustrated that it's a thing. Like, for as much as I get upset about the whole Miles Morales switch or the senseless reuse of the same Peter Parker tropes, I'm glad that we can have a conversation like this about the problems that stem from that, because the corporate side of everything wants you to just buy it. Oh, it's just as good, this and that. And I'm glad that there's the audience that really wants to treat it, like the original. There's so much that adds to it because, it's not that costume or the name Spider-Man that makes the character interesting. It's his life. And all you're doing is when you make Miles Morales the center of attention, it's like, well, this is their Uncle Ben, this is their Aunt May, this is their Captain Stacy, this is their Gwen Stacy. It's just like, really, are these characters now interchangeable into the brand that is Spider-Man? Because it's definitely the Disney thing where it's like, it doesn't matter what it is, it's under the Spider brand and people will buy it. And I'll tell you this, I used to spend more money on average on Spider-Man stuff than your average person would. Like, I put like this, I would spend in 1 month what your average person that likes Spider-Man would spend on it in a year. I'd buy every book, I'd buy shirts, games, posters, action figures. I mean, there's a reason why I have like 100 Spider-Man figures, hot toys, you name it. But as they continue to do the stuff I don't like, I either don't buy anything or I really pare it down to just specific versions. Like, I'll get something that's based off. I hate that I have to say Peter Parker Spider-Man, because when I say it like that, I think I'm talking about the old book from the 80s. But like, it's just flat out, it is what it is. It's just like, I'm only going to support that version. I'm only going to watch the movies based on regular Spider-Man. I'm not going to go out and, outside of the YouTube channel, I'm not supporting Miles Morales. It's not that I'm angry. It's just, it's not for me anymore. I'm not reading the same thing. You make it to where it's too similar yet so different that I don't want it. Just give me the regular thing that works. I will constantly go back and buy Spider-Man if it's good, but if it's not, I will just stick with stuff in the past, and they won't make money off of me. I'll go back to continue my collection, or maybe invest in a Marvel Masterworks to read higher quality prints of it. But other than that, the characters just kind of fall off for me, and only their memories and the excitement that I felt as a kid stay with me, and those are always associated and tied to the real or Peter Parker version of the character.
Well, that's beautifully said, and I think we can end the conversation here. But before we do, Jeff, please tell the audience where they can find you and your awesome comic that you've got going on.
Well, thank you. Folks, you can find me on the World Class Bullshitters YouTube channel. I'm there almost every day, except pretty much Saturdays, because I need some time to sleep. But you can find me on the World Class Bullshitters Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to check out my art, which I recommend you do, you can go to wokebusterscomic.com, and you can see that finishing up an epic. It's a comedy epic. It's a Ghostbusters style parody of modern society, but it's funny. It's not some boring work that thinks it's more than it is. No, it's fun. It speaks to people. That's what I like to think my work is. I speak to the people through the characters I create, because they're us. They're relatable, they're funny, they're flawed, they are what they are, just like people are. And you don't want to, you always want a little honesty with that. And I think that's one of the most important parts. So that's what I've put into the art. And speaking of art, it's designed to look like the Ghostbusters cartoon of the 80s. I got bright colors, over the top expressions, crazy action. It's a fun book that I can't wait for people to read. It'll be out at the end of this year, and I'm very proud of it. So be on the lookout for that, and just listen to our show. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook to get all the updates on everything I'm doing with World Class Bullshitters or my art career or anything like that. And come see me at the Cincinnati Comic Expo this September. I'll be there, and you can get some prints and get some stuff signed and talk to me about comics and all the wonderful stuff we talked about today.
Well, I am really looking forward to that, Jeff. Thank you so much for hanging out. This has been an awesome conversation. I loved the direction it went. Very surprising, really cerebral. I dig it. I love chatting with you about this type of stuff. So thank you so much, everyone out there. If you're for listening, thank you for hanging out with us for this time. If you want more of these things, we will be making more of them. Just let us know in the comments, and please feel free to share. And never forget, when it comes to great stories, it all starts with the script.